Dr. Sternglass knew the risk. A silent war, invisible twist. From the fallout clouds to the gamma rays, he saw the truth in a poisoned haze. They laughed him off, they turned away.
Hello, everybody, welcome back.
Radiation never fades away.
Hope you had a great day today. It's May the 7th, 2025. Dr. Sternglass by James Lucid on YouTube. It's a really important song. Dr. Sternglass was the man who quantified death after weapons testing worldwide from the radioactive fallout. So we got a poll for you tonight and every night. Should India and Pakistan have sanctions for threatening to use nuclear weapons rather than Iran, who doesn't even have nuclear weapons? How come they don't sanction India and Pakistan? What would be the big crime in sanctioning? I mean, like, these people are very unstable. Alrighty, we got an early show again tonight. Nothing I can do about it. That's the cards we're dealt with today, yesterday. West Coast history, looking back at the conference on ocean resources. The story came out on the 3rd. And somehow I missed it. Yeah, because we were doing presentations on Harvard University, MIT universities. We were critiquing their presentations from the original accident, right? Now this is up in Tofino, Ucluelet. I used to live in Tofino a long time ago. And we done research expeditions after Fukushima in Ucluelet and Banfield and Tofino. I was barred from Banfield's research institution out there because I came in and done an interview with the dean of the institution, right? They took the video down. We had to reinstate it. And he said there was no Fukushima. Nothing got out. There was no damage. And these are marine research. They have 70 universities funding them. And they used to have a live camera out front, and they took that down after Fukushima. All the starfish were melting. The Westerly News looks back at the history of Ucluelet and Tofino, 2014. They wrote a series of articles highlighting the vital ocean resources. Now remember, they're connected to the hips with the Research Institute in Banfield. Just at the middle of their harbour, basically. Or it's a big so-called harbour, right? But that's that's where it was to the west coast of Vancouver Island. A photo on the front of the April 30th, 2014 Westerly. We were out doing research expeditions at this time. From Vancouver to British to Alaska for 6 years. And I was there at around that same time. Depicted a room full of people listening to speakers from the North Island College, hosted at Ucluelet Aquarium. And so you have Banfield, which is out a really treacherous road out onto the coastline, and the aquarium, I was in there, took pictures, we were in there asking questions of why there was no species in the aquarium. And the only sea anemone they had there out of the 84 species was the green sea anemone. And I was asking about that. because that was the only one we can find left on the coastline of the 84 species, right? I can't remember their answer anymore. It's a long time ago. The conference featured 4 speakers whose topics included the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster and the divorce occurring between nature and humanity. Well, by 2014, the species were, the mussels were missing, the barnacles were missing. These were very dominant shoreline species. The starfish were missing. And this was, in 2011, Ucluelet Tofino was the place to be. If you're going on vacation, that was the place you would have went to take your children to see the wild West Coast, right? It was organized by Bill Morrison of the NIC in the Math Science Department. Chair of the day, Christine Hodgson. Bill wanted to give Ucluelet the gift of listening to the academic speakers in their home communities. Well, they have 70 universities funding a research center just up the shoreline. So they have there's no shortages of academics for this area, right? A biology instructor at the NIC at the time. No, they refused to acknowledge Fukushima happened. To the West Coast residents, Fukushima, agricultural, they're very real. And the impact, if the impact are going to be felt anywhere, so suggesting that it wasn't, they're going to be felt in Ucluelet first. Well, that whole West Coast, right, it's stripped permanently now. If you're not familiar with that, I'll show you a couple of pictures right here coming up in a minute, actually. What better way to understand the science-informed debate than to learn firsthand from the people at the forefront of the research, which wasn't them, it was me. I'll show you. So I was out there doing the research. They weren't. They covered it up. I went and interviewed them. I should repost that video because he took down my other site when we were researching spiders. So I had went from Vancouver, British Columbia, Ucluelet's over here, and down here rather, to Alaska for 6 years on research expeditions, right? The species to your left are exterminated. So it's a very visible species. And that's why they were having that farm, and they were saying, well, if anything, the West Coast was going to be struck first. Well, it was. Those species are missing, see? And so when I seen that story today, I was really upset about it, that they had the arrogance to come out and say that if something was going to be found, it would have been on the West Coast. What, like tsunami? They even found lots of tsunami debris along that coastline, but then claimed radiation couldn't reach North America. But the headlines, like the species to your left are exterminated. We went back for 5 more years to see if those species recovered. Because it was highly visible, see? You couldn't pretend they didn't exist. They were very visible species. All right, let's get back on the program for tonight. We're doing a news cycle tonight. And just remember, 40% drop in the Pacific whale population was 10,350. They were emaciated. That's the gray whales. We've seen the same thing with the humpback whales, with the fin whales, with the beak whales. Thousands of them showing up emaciated. Every species. They were trying to blame it on there was unusual mortality events for all kinds of species, not just these 4. All the killer whales are emaciated, starving to death. And the 7,000 humpback whale that they discovered were missing and had starved to death, because we had covered that during that whole period. We still covered it. We got another show ready to go right now on the die-offs. But the 7,000 whales were on top of the 2016-2019 unusual mortality event. That was on top of it, the extra 7,000 whales. Because the radioactive fallout covered the whole planet. And it wasn't just whales, right? It was all the species disappeared. The birds were all emaciated. And the list is very long. Maybe, I'm not saying I will, but maybe if I do a show tomorrow night, I'll do the die-off show that I should have done last week because that's got to get done. Here we go. Let's get back into the stories, the news cycle today. Shouldn't they sanction India and Pakistan to try to get them to calm down? Why are you worried about Iran when India and Pakistan's ready to nuke the whole planet with a... And some of those stories will come up in a little bit. There you go. Nuclear war between India and Pakistan is a worldwide threat, not Iran. Self-centered, egotistic Zionists are suggesting that the only people we should worry about is Iran. Let's sanction them as if they haven't been sanctioned enough for decades. Let me see here. How are we doing tonight? I've been doing the show for over a decade straight. I got 5 people in my show. Wow. How the hell we find that many people tonight? That's a bit of a miracle. 5 people at one time. I'm too nervous to do my show now, that many people. Bless your hearts, by the way. Nobody's allowed to talk about Fukushima. Nobody. Nobody does anyway. Like there's less than 5 people, I think. India and Pakistan have several shooting matches. I knew there was something wrong there. I still had my headphones on. Gonna make me fight. India and Pakistan have several shooting matches since they carried out a total of 9 underground nuclear weapon tests in 1998 each. And at the same time, France figured they'd be smart, and so they set off a couple of underground nuclear tests and got caught. And the whole world, in 1998 when that was happening, I thought it was 1996 for some reason. Anyway, regardless, when that was taking place in the 90s, France had set off some too, but the whole world was marching in the streets in 1990s because India and Pakistan were going tit for tat with nuclear weapons. However, they don't make public threats to use their nukes, around 170 nuclear warheads each. Well, they do. They have many, many times. We've covered them many times just in the last 12, 14 years. And if you're one of those 5 or 6 people that watch my show, then you would know that. I probably got more people than that. It's just the censorship is... I might have like 7 people or something. It's just the censorship is anal. The nuclear industry, the International Degenerate Agency, Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi's little butt plugs, and the rest of them really disrespect anybody that's honest. Well, because, see, there's no room for honesty in the nuclear industry. Yeah, that's better. I can see everybody now. Oh my God. Pakistan has only 1/6 of the Indian population and 1/10 of its wealth. I'm still getting used to the new setup here. I smurfed up, did I? Hang on. La 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 la. La 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 la. I'm Dana, by the way, in case you didn't know. And everybody's free to call in Canada, United States, New Mexico. You can text me also. at 709-589-4406. I don't hide away from anybody, ever, under any circumstances. I've been public since so long now, I couldn't tell you when I started. The nuclear industry has never challenged me. They just attack me. They just smear me. They just make stuff up about me. They just get me arrested and give me gag orders and stuff like that to protect their assets. But they don't challenge me. And we done a presentation. At the last 5 videos, we covered Harvard University's presentation, video presentation, and dissected that a few days back. We covered MIT, the same thing, and Stanford University. We've done that 12 years ago too, right? Nevertheless, the relationship between the two countries is fundamentally unstable because Pakistan has 1/6 of India's population, 1/10 of its wealth. So therefore they should nuke each other, everybody else. Yeah, it makes sense. We're talking about Pakistan and India. That makes sense, I suppose. Pakistan almost certainly would lose a major non-nuclear conflict, like a shooting war. By contrast, both countries would be destroyed in a nuclear war. So threatening to escalate a war to the nuclear level would give Pakistan a weird kind of leverage. And like we got railway ministers threatening in Pakistan, threatening India with nuclear weapons. Of all, like, railway ministers, really, folks? That's how unstable the country actually is. Yet the rest of the world ignores these local calculations because other countries don't feel threatened by a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. Because everybody's worried about Iran that don't even have nuclear weapons. They believe it would largely stay in South Asia. Just because your media... You don't have a media. I don't know if you ever had a media. You have public relation firm for whatever industry is bidden today, right? Particularly for the military-industrial complex, particularly for United Nations subsidies, which is 195 militaries, and NATO, which is 30 militaries. The present confrontation between the two is far more dangerous for the world than the Ukraine war or any other current conflict. You know, like Iran, Israel. Matters now have gotten worse with Modi, and I was like, oh shit, I remember that scumbag. Suspending the Indus Water Treaty of 1960, which regulates the sharing of 6 river water between India and Pakistan. So Modi's from India, right? Which has the biggest population. 6 rivers waters between India and Pakistan. The water is existential for Pakistan, where it irrigates 80% of the land on which the country grows food for its 250 million people. And India is going to cut the water off, and of course cutting water off of any country or threatening the water of any country has long been recognized as an act of war, right? And so now let's poison the entire planet with radioactive followers so none of the water anywhere can be ever drank again. Is their solution as usual. Modi is playing with far more lives than the others. Not just the 20 million prompt dead expected from the blast, the nuclear blast, the nuclear fireballs, and the fallout, radioactive. When I say radioactive fallout, because that's what we're talking about, in a full-scale Indo-Paki nuclear war, but the 200 million or 2 billion who would die there and elsewhere in the 10-year nuclear winter. We've had nuclear wars, right? The nuclear weapons testing was a nuclear war. A nuclear winter which conditions cold enough to cut global food production would start with hundreds of firestorms that boost enormous amounts of soot into the stratosphere. This was a paper written by 2 people, right? Quite a while back. We've covered those 2 people many times over the years. And nobody else wrote a paper suggesting this was how it was going to play out. But that was seized upon by the United Nations bootlicking media and Hollywood, and then used as a fact when it simply wasn't a fact. The soot would block the sunlight, causing cold temperatures, stays for years because there was no rain in the stratosphere to remove it. So if you look at the list of nuclear weapons tests, if you look at the megatons, United States, Soviet Union were responsible for roughly 86% of all nuclear tests. The Soviet Union wanted their test to Castle Bravo was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the one time. If that's not a nuclear war, what is? If 3,000 Nagasaki, Hiroshima-sized bombs going off at the same time is not enough to cause a nuclear winter, what is? Well, India and Pakistan only got 170 nuclear weapons each. None of them close to Castle Bravo, the Americans, or the Taz or Bomba. France continued atmospheric nuclear testing until 1974 and China till 1980s. France, India, and Pakistan were doing it in the late 90s. The French government, what they done to the French Polynesians was equal to a Nagasaki bomb every week for 12 years. The Taser Bomba, the largest nuclear weapons ever tested, was equal to 3,000 minimum now, is probably a lot more than that, but 3,800 Nagasaki bombs, plutonium bombs going off at the same time. We never had a nuclear winter. The only nuclear winter we got is the chemtrails. They're always spraying up there to block out the sun. In total, you need the sun, right? All the plants, insects, birds, animals, everything need the sun, right? Your pituitary glands need the sun in particular, right? In total nuclear tests, megaton each, from 1945 to 1992, 520 atmospheric nuclear explosions, including underwater. So, like when you explode the nuclear weapons underwater, there was another thing that happened was the sulfur was liberated, and the sulfur became spherical balls, and then the hydrogen peroxide balls, sulfur balls, and they ingested uranium, plutonium, everything else, and became super hot particles, sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs. And like these are super hot particles. These, it takes one of these to really just wreck your immune system of every species, let alone a human, right? With 545 megatons. These are absurd numbers we're talking about. I've done some calculations for you coming up. And a peak occurring in 1962 to 1961, 61 to 62. In a 2-year period, it was 430 megatons were detonated in the atmosphere. 430, or 340. Where the hell did I get 430? Oh, I see. 340 megatons were detonated. I don't even know what I said, thank goodness. Blah, blah. 340 megatons, which is 6.8 times the Soviet Union's biggest bomb, which was equal to 25,800 Nagasaki bombs going off in a 2-year period. I didn't see a nuclear winter for 10 years or 10 days. Did you? That was 26,000 Nagasaki bombs in just a 2-year period released into the environment. Is that a nuclear war? Does that count as a nuclear war because it wasn't done in anger? You atomized and aerosoled islands, for goodness sakes. An entire forest with the Soviet Union's bomb. Well, the estimated number of underground nuclear tests, all of them were vented. Every one of them are vented. When they show you that picture there, does that look like an underground test? Everything was vented. All the underground tests split the earth open, and there was a manhole cover that was ejected into space at about 170,000 miles per hour or something. It's still headed towards another galaxy, right? It's the fastest man-made moving object in human history. Everything was all these underground nuclear tests split the earth open, and it was massive speed of emissions coming out of there. Nothing was contained in the ground. 1,352 explosions with a total yield of 90 megatons. And that's a nuclear war, isn't it? Like total is around 38,000 Nagasaki bombs were released into our environment, our ecosystem. And so you can trace the decline of all the insects and birds and salmon and everything else back to that era. That's what we've seen. And then the cancer clusters, the cancer epidemics, the Alzheimer's, the diabetes epidemics are all easily, which was 6,840 Nagasaki bombs for 90 megaton. Nuclear war between India and Pakistan is a worldwide threat. Nuclear power plants, fuel pools is a nuclear threat to every species on the planet too, by the way. But shouldn't we have some sanctions against India and Pakistan? Excuse me. A nuclear winter with conditions cold enough to cut global food productions would start with hundreds of firestorms that boost enormous amounts of soot. It's really interesting. They're not going to be like military over out in the ocean here or out in some other area away from cities or something. All the projections are that they're not going to go after the militaries anywhere. They're just going to go after the big cities and burn the big cities down. This is a fly. Whoever wrote, and I think I did import. I probably did import into my new computer. I've never tried to use it since we started. This new one is such a blessing, my goodness. Just let me I don't know if I got it into quick picks or not. I could probably find that study. You want to give me a second? Yeah, I got, because I'm a pack rat, right? I collect everything too over all these years. My collection, I don't think there's anybody out there with a better collection than me. Nuclear winter. I know I got it right here somewhere. Just fallout. Just give me a second, see if I can hunt it down here. That study that they're talking about. Because I would have put it in multiple places. That's not there. Carbon-free, floating reactors, space, hydrogen, nuclear gatekeepers, pro-nuclear bootlickers. Nuclear winter theory. Well, holy shit. Oak Ridge, environmental consequences of a nuclear war, grim new, the atmosphere after nuclear. Well, that's Springer. Let's try that. Here, I'll bring it up on the screen for you. This should be the study that they're talking about. Give me a cookies, you scumbags. Yeah, this was the study. It was a single study. And look at all the accesses to it. 3,178. Most academic studies, be lucky if they got 5 accesses to it, right? That one has 3,178 because they're the only one that produced the study. And Springer, Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley are the 3 biggest publishers. They have 22,000 journals. And so some of the journals are all propaganda, right? And then they'll let you get access to those journals. $34 a month for basics. That's ticker tape stuff, right? Our investigation to the state of the atmosphere following a nuclear exchange suggests other severely damaging effects to human life and delicate ecosystem to which we belong will during life. So nuclear fuel pools have already wrecked the entire ecosystems because the fuel pools worldwide are still splitting atoms. The atmosphere after a nuclear war, twilight at noon. And this was used by the United Nations to bludgeon humanity, as if a single study, and nobody else produced those types of studies. Just give me one more try here. Nuclear winter. Is that what I said earlier? Brainwashing. Yeah, it's right around here somewhere. Nuclear winter theory. Let me open all 4 of them. Actually, I'll bring you back over here now. I don't know what I got there. You had that one there we just looked at. Oak Ridge. Professor, nuclear war might cause crop failure, famine, and that's the same people. Environment consequences of a nuclear war. Oh, it's just 6 pages. I think that was the original one. Yeah, that looks like the original one. That one right there. And grim new study shows how nuclear war smoke would spell the end for mankind. None of these are quantified because we already had nuclear wars. It was called nuclear testing. It's the same radioactive fallout. It's the same thing. And we didn't have the attributes they're suggesting, right? It's been a while since we brought up that study. We block the sunlight, causing cold temperatures, stays for years because there's no rain in the stratosphere to remove it. So they're suggesting that everything's going to go into the stratosphere, and then none of this turned out to be true, right? If Castle Bravo, which was equal to the United States and the atolls, if that was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki, if that's not going to put it into the stratosphere, what would? If the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union's biggest bomb, which was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs, plutonium bombs, didn't do it. India and Pakistan is not going to do it, right? It's simply not true. It's the fear-mongering, see? Because most people don't remember anything, of course, about the nuclear testing, right? Which was a nuclear war. Same weapons, same radioactive fallout. The original calculations done in the 80s for an all-out nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union. That's not true either, because they were had a nuclear war at that time, right? With the nuclear bombs they were setting off everywhere, because the industry, like the nuclear industry, is a moron industry. I've never seen nothing like it. We've been covering it for 23 years, and that's the one thing we noticed. Like, incredible education, but that don't mean anything. There's lots of savants out there. There's lots of functional autism people in the institutions. They'll get degree after degree after degree, and the university will sometimes suck them up and turn them into a professor because they can regurgitate a book. They won't have a debate about anything. They'll just regurgitate the book. They're perfect for professors, right? And that's what a typical professor does. And then famine conditions would prevail worldwide for about 10 years. This is based upon a single paper by 2 guys, and then was used by United Nations to bludgeon humanity. Go on worrying about Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, Taiwan, and so on, but the big threat is a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. I agree wholeheartedly. Should India and Pakistan have sanctions for threatening to use nuclear weapons rather than Iran that don't have any? Why would somebody vote no on that for? Why would you do that? Journalist. Dyer is a journalist. Like, yucky journalist. Google agreed to fund the development of 3 nuclear sites. No, they didn't. They agreed to fund a small fraction. But you wouldn't believe the headlines today of those connotations. Oh, Google's going to build 3 reactors. You got to buy stocks. It could be small modular reactor. You better buy. They were everywhere. There's probably like 50 headlines today. Google's building nuclear reactors. And when you read the story, of course, it's simply not true. All the journalists are doing. The journalist's job is to cut your throat every chance they get. That's their job. Their job is to stab you in the back, stab all the species in the back. Nuclear developer Elementl Power, what a stupid name, man, said Wednesday he signed an agreement with Google to develop 3 project sites for advanced reactors. Sites. In the latest example of tech giants teaming up with the nuclear industry. Will commit early stage development capital to 3 projects. Yeah, but just for like licensing and a few other things. Google's not building a reactor. They're not paying the nut job small modular reactor industry to produce a reactor. They don't even have an application into the regulatory agencies. That means they're decades or 2 away from even building a test reactor at one of the national laboratories. It's a complete fantasy to suggest that they're going to be building a reactor. But the media, man, and so all the stocks are flying today for the nuclear degenerate agencies. Just give me a second. You don't want to hear the noise it makes. There you go. In the latest example of a tech giant teaming up with the nuclear industry is an effort to meet the vast energy needs of data centers. The vast energy, so like nuclear is the worst thing you can do. The emissions from the fuel pools are hideous. That's why we're seeing an epidemic of heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, cancer clusters, cancer epidemics, autism, Down syndrome epidemics. Fukushima was a pulse event on top of that, see? On top of 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment, all the dumping, all the nuclear accidents they had, all the nuclear... it's horrifying how much they actually dumped into the oceans and into the Great Lakes and that. It's terrorism what they done. To meet the vast needs of data centers. We don't need the data centers. They're the worst thing could happen to us. How is data centers going to benefit humanity? How is that going to restore the bees? How is that going to fatten up the emaciated whales? How is that going to bring back all the species that have been exterminated by the nuclear war from the nuclear industry has been carrying out for 80 years through the emissions? Google will have the option to buy the power once the sites are up and running. Well, like if they were building the reactors, then they wouldn't have to buy the power after, would they? No, all they're doing is contributing. Because what happened was a year and a half ago or something, Google, Amazon, Meta, Facebook, had came out and made these exact same claims. And then the nuclear industry used that to push stocks in small modular reactors, in fusion too, and they don't have an actual product. And the investors, all of them, lost their shirts over. And every 3 or 4 weeks, that's the scam cycle repeats, right? But we haven't seen it, at least publicized, in the last 4 or 5 weeks for some reason. And so here we go again. I would imagine this is the same pump and dump scam to get mom and pop investors to buy into the small modular reactor companies that don't have a product. What are they doing on the stock exchange when you haven't got a product? How is that even possible? It hasn't yet chosen what type of reactor will use at its sites. It's not building reactors. It don't have sites. The company is ready to begin construction. It will soon choose the reactor technology that's furthest along in the development. None of this is true. It's a complete departure from the actual real story, and this was one of the first stories that showed up. Innovative partnerships like this are necessary to mobilize the capital required to build the stupid nuclear projects. No, you can give them, and they give them all the money they ever wanted. They still can't produce the reactors. They can't produce an application for the regulatory agency. They can't produce the design. There's no innovations in the nuclear industry since the 40s or 50s or something. And the design on the fusion reactors, every one of them, every fusion reactor is using the same design from a patent in 1904. There is no innovation in the nuclear industry. There is no nuclear renaissance. There's a nuclear hype meant to lull complacent investors into buying stocks into the small modular reactor companies that don't have a product. Ultra-safe nuclear has gone bankrupt. NuScale is under siege from lawsuits from their previous investors. There's a lot of companies like that out there where they just rob the investors. They didn't try to acquire land to build a reactor. They didn't try to come up with a full design and submit it to the regulatory agencies. The only one that NuScale that put a design in there wasn't a complete design. NuScale. And Elementl Power CEO is Chris Colbert is the same guy who almost bankrupt NuScale. And NuScale is not developing a small modular reactor. There's no evidence that they're actually trying to do it. Right? It's all hype. The whole bloody industry is a fly-by-night scam situation. 50 gigawatts of new power capacity needed by 2027. That's next year. These people are idiots. Really, they're going to build 50 new reactors between now and next year. These are morons, eh? They're just there to rob the unsuspecting investors. Nuclear energy offers a brighter future for Atlantic Canada. Geoffrey V. Hurley. He went to France. He came back and he's mesmerized. He's just hypnotized. He's ecstatic because France, he says, I'll go through these lies here now. This is the death machine they got in Nova Scotia, in New Brunswick, which is the Point Leper nuclear disease factory. It's legally they're allowed to release 16,400,000 trillion atoms into the environment each year. The UK Sizewell reactor only released 8 trillion. Canadian CANDU reactors, look at them up the top ones, the CANDU reactors. Look how much they're releasing. Legally, the CANDU reactors can't contain the emissions. That should frighten the daylights out of you. That's not it. Right here. And so this guy, he didn't write the story. He didn't write this story. This story is way too complicated for him to write it, for a journalist to write it. It's written by the Nuclear Energy Institute or the International Atomic Energy Agency. He put his name on it. He might have went to France, but that's as close to real as the rest of the story. He didn't write this story. I just returned from a holiday in France where I learned that France generates... We've heard this narrative many times. I learned that France generated 70% of electricity by nuclear power. France, to the French Polynesians, nuclear testing was equal to a Nagasaki bomb a week for 12 years. They caused a civil war in Nigeria for 60 years so they can get cheap uranium. So to come out and to paint it, this is a typical story from the degenerate agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the degenerate Jeff Hurley. He didn't write the story. One of the lowest carbon grids in the world. Like, what are you talking about? Nuclear is the most carbon-intensive, resource-intensive industry on the planet. Every nuclear reactor, on top of that, needs dedicated 2 massive gas, oil, and coal plants. Like, they're trying to convince the Canadian, the Atlantic provinces, right, to get into that agenda of nuclear reactors. France's nuclear journey begins in 1974 when the oil crisis launched an ambitious program to build standardized reactors, the oil crisis. No, like, the economy of scales is what happened back then. Right? They were selling reactors and they didn't even have applications into the regulatory agencies. And countries were putting in orders for 5, 10, 15, and France was one of them. And so they had all this catching up they had to do. And the French government was paying for everything. And then The releases from all the reactors in France, which are every one of them are surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Every one of them, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into those farms. He said, a friend of mine who grew up in a large French city never realized that her home was next door to a nuclear reactor. And this is we don't really hear this particular type story for a few years now, and now it's coming back again. Because we usually come out and throttle them for telling these lies. A friend of mine who grew up in a large French city never realized that her home was next to a nuclear reactor, since there was no dirty smoke emissions. So the idea of that is, right, to lull the complacent people who are reading the story and is, wow, they don't have any dirty smokes from nuclear power plants. Well, that sounds pretty good, honey. Hey, kids, come over and read this story. This is what this fantasy is all about, that they hope. Like that, it's just a fantasy when they write these stories. Only steam that appears is white smoke. We'll challenge their narrative coming up in a little bit. And that is non-radioactive. The one thing about the pro-nuclear community is they're just shameless, eh? Gutless, on top of that. And contains no pollutants. Like, a nuclear plant needs 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons of water a minute. Think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks of water going past your front door each minute. Where do you think that energy is coming from? Nuclear plants can't run on their own energy. And I'm going to show you some of the mines and everything coming up. I already got it. Most of it picked out. The walls surrounding the reactors were camouflaged with attractive foliage. Well, because of the nuclear industry, the radioactive fallout around the planet, most of the foliage is not breaking down anymore. That's why we're seeing these massive forest fires that we can't control. It's because you killed a biota with radioactive fallout in the foliage in the litter. It doesn't break down anymore. Because the biota that would normally break all that down was wiped out. The fungus, the bacteria was all wiped out by the pulse event from Fukushima and 70 years previous to that of radioactive fallout. The situation in France with respect to nuclear confirms my own observations as a graduate student doing environmental field work adjacent to the Bruce nuclear facility at Douglas Point in Ontario, Canada. I recall being amazed that thousands of megawatts of power could be produced. Clearly, this is a worm. The person who put his name on this article is a degenerate worm. And all the nuclear waste from its operations over decades, actually a small amount, in terms of volume, could be managed safely on such a small tract of land. Like, clearly, this guy didn't write the story. This is a notorious bootlegger that wrote this story for the nuclear industry. First off, every 14 months or so, you're going to take out at least a third of the reactor core. That's still splitting the same amount of atoms with no containment now into your community and your fresh water, which is one of the biggest aquifers on the planet in front of Bruce Power, by the way. The third biggest aquifer on the planet is the Great Lakes, right? Of fresh water. That's incredibly contaminated, not just with tritium, but with everything else. The fuel pools have the tall, skinny stacks, not the big, fat, wide ones, right? The tall, skinny stacks is where they're pumping out from the fuel pools the emissions. They have to replenish the fuel pool about 120,000 liters a day of very specialized water. But the water that's evaporating is hundreds of trillions of atoms per liter being released directly into the environment. And because Bruce Power is right there where there's several million people right there, and then on the other side of the lakes is United States major cities. It was just the whole story was disgusting. Nuclear factoids. Experts argued nuclear power is the optimal energy source globally. Yeah, if it was, why ain't there a nuclear renaissance since the early 90s? You get the same gigawatts now as you had in the 90s. Emphasizing its safety and environmental benefits. It kills everything, and it kills the bacteria and the fungus in the soil on top of that. So now your soil doesn't soak up water anymore, which means you have serious floods all over the world since Fukushima. And when you start looking at everything I'm saying and you go apply it to post-Fukushima, you really start to appreciate the reality of what happened at Fukushima. And then the legacy of the 70 years of nuclear industry before that. But Fukushima was a pulse event. 36 reactor cores melted down in 8 fuel pools at the top of 4 reactor buildings. Each of those reactor cores were equal to 100 Chernobyls. Nuclear energy is statistically the safest energy source. And so when you hear that line, you just want to run up and kick a pro-nuclear in the nuts, don't you? Causing orders of magnitude fewer deaths than natural gas and coal, and even fewer than solar and wind. Like, I almost vomited it when I heard that today. That's clearly the International Atomic Energy Agency's narrative right there. After Fukushima, there was 860,000 extra cancers in the first year. In just the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. It's not just cancer. And if you go back and look at my video last night about the part about Chernobyl early in the video, which reminds me, we still got to do a Chernobyl anniversary shows, haven't we? We've done 8 anniversary shows for Fukushima. And I smurfed up and I done Harvard, Stanford, and MIT instead of the... I forgot about the Chernobyl anniversary, unfortunately. But the section I done last night was clearly showing nuclear is the furthest thing from the safest source. By a long stretch. Nuclear is... Because a single atom, with 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. Just one of them in your body will build a tumor around it. Your body will never stop attacking you with white blood cells. Because it's in your body, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light. It's wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, everything else. Your body tries to repair that every second. And it tries to build a tumor around the source. And it'll do that for the rest of your life. It'll never, even if it builds a tumor, it'll still keep attacking it. Because it's a foreign object. And it's the same is true for every species. We'll have the same biological effect on them. Nuclear kills more than and Dr. Sternglass, if you look up, and we played that little bit of a song at the beginning, if you look up Dr. Sternglass, you'll see nuclear is the furthest thing from safe. It's the worst. And so every time you see this propaganda coming out, you really should have nothing but contempt for the nuclear industry. The utmost contempt on top of that. And whenever I see these connotations, I get really upset because it's so dishonest and disingenuous. Fukushima caused one radiation linked to death. There was 13,646 children out of 38,000 children with tumors 2 centimeters. Their thyroid gland is only 2 centimeters on their thyroid glands. That's just a starter. 14,200 children, every 100,000 children need open heart surgery. That's the first. The other ones were the first year. That study was 2019 about the children would need open heart surgery for congenital heart diseases. If you're pro-nuclear, you're a serial killer monster. You're a monster. But let me show you another one. I shouldn't have to show anything, right? Because I've been at this for so long. But the nuclear industry is the one. He doesn't show you link you to any studies to quantify his assertions. The death rates might cause the creeps to some people. Extreme increase in mortality caused by heart attacks. 12,700 people died in a single month of heart attacks. Fukushima has a street there where 7 people dropped dead in 1 year, in the first year. 6 out of 10 children got diabetes, and they were expecting diabetes in the children, and they weren't surprised when it showed up. Fukushima caused one radiation-linked death is the most dishonest, disgusting, parasitic thing to say. Like, people that do that should spend at least 10 years in jail for putting out that kind of lie, that kind of harmful lies. With most fatalities stemming from evacuation panic. It was 3,000 people. Now, Harvard University, we covered that a couple of days ago, was talking about lethal doses 10 kilometers away from the nuclear plant because of the plume. And a lot of people weren't evacuated for a month or two. And in the first week or 2 weeks, there was around 3,000 people died from evacuation. We've seen absurd amounts of evacuations from typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes. Millions and millions and millions of people. We've never seen mass mortality events. Fukushima is the only time we've seen a mass mortality event from evacuees. And 2 and 2 definitely makes 4, right? Rather than radiation. From panic rather than radiation. So clearly this was written by the worst scumbag conceivable in the nuclear industry. The coward of the cowards. Nuclear energy produces 0 direct carbon emissions. First off, like, are you insane? Are you insane? Like, all nuclear power plants need 2 gas, oil, massive, humongous gas, oil, and coal plants. 24 hours a day dedicated to the nuclear site, to these massive city-sized nuclear sites. Everything on the site is triply inspected. Everything is the best of the best material. It's the most resource-intensive industry in human history, bar nothing. And then trying to decommission these sites for 40 or 50 years is the most resource-intensive. On top of that, the emissions from the site are catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. The fuel pools are, after about 14 months, you take the first fuel out of a reactor and put it in the pool with no containment. And that's why most plants are surrounded by farms. And then everybody who eats the food from those farms is going to get some kind of autoimmune disease. And then what they do in the hospitals, you take the nuclear waste and stick it into people in the hospitals and say that, and call that a cure, when 3% of the population would live more than 5 years after getting that done to them. It's better not to do nothing. And the quality of life is immediately destroyed. How can you be so cruel to stick nuclear waste into people? How can you be that evil that that's an option? And you wouldn't believe the people that we've covered over the years that make a living doing it. And every one of them, and we cover them, are unbelievably evil in their life. They're unbelievable. It's unbelievable that anybody would describe them as a human. It's unbelievable that anybody described this guy as a human who put his name on this story. Imagine how evil you are to put your name on that story. How insidious and monstrous you have to be to put your name on that story. What kind of cowards you got to be to put your name on that story. What kind of low-life degenerates you got to be to put your name on that story. Unlike renewables, nuclear provide 24/7 baseload power. Like, that's the oldest song and dance you've ever heard. Like, geothermal is 100,000 times better than that. Why would you use nuclear when you have geothermal? Nuclear footprint on land at sea is 100 times smaller per energy unit produced in wind or solar. Why are you using wind and solar when you have geothermal? Shit for brains. By the way, the Hanford site occupies 586 square miles. And they dumped, in just one go, 450 billion gallons direct of nuclear sludge, that's splitting atoms, directly into the soil in on-line trenches and 41 miles of on-line trenches, right alongside the Columbia River. And that's equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide of nuclear waste, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet, and every gram is hammering, splitting atoms into the environment. Every nuclear plant is dependent upon 2 gas, oil, and coal plants. These are huge sites. You got to put all that into the equation too. Just to get the fuel to put in the reactor, you got to destroy mountains and mountains. You got to destroy mountains and mountains. And you see those ponds on the top? They're chemical ponds. Up there on the top in the background, that's chemical ponds. So just to get the uranium out of the ground and get it to the yellow cake, not to the fuel, just to the yellow cake process, is the most resource intensive. It uses more gas, oil, and coal than a gas, oil, and coal plant would. Like, the whole process, and then the chemicals are always evaporated into the communities, into the environment, into the ecosystem. If the dams don't break open and poison everything, like they've done here in Canada and many other places over the years. Like, the whole process just to get to the fuel is insidious. Once the fuel goes through a chain reaction, and start splitting atoms after, a year, 14 months or something, they take a third of it out and put it in the fuel pool. Those atoms that it's splitting are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. They attack everything with replicating cells forever. Long past the human experience. You can't destroy it either. You can't put it in the incinerator and burn it. And when you look at the legacy, the history of them dumping before there were any rules or regulations, not just in the ocean, but all the aquifers within 100 miles of any of these sites is catastrophic to the health of every species, including humans. It's a degenerate industry. The only way the industry works is by hiring the most ruthless scum cowards that they can find on the planet. Additional nuclear waste often overemphasized, really, is minimal and manageable. You can't manage nuclear waste shit for brains. You horrible creature. You terrible subhuman monster. They haven't come up with a solution to manage nuclear waste in 80 years. And all the best, sharpest minds on the planet got together and said, let's dig a hole and put it down in a hole where it's going to melt down and split the earth open and everything will melt down at the one time. With advanced reactors capable of recycling spent fuel, there is no advanced reactors. You don't have an application for a single license into a single regulatory agency. And me climate calls. I want to go find this guy and pull the hair right out of his head. That's how much I hate that guy. I like to sue him in civil court on top of that. Canada's nuclear expertise is world class. It's a genocide. The CANDU reactors are genocide reactors. Omnicide reactors. Our engineers designed some of the safest reactors on the planet. Like, what are you talking about, you sadistic little monster? Now, I'm not talking about the guy with the name on the story. I'm talking about the guy who actually wrote the story. Because the guy with his name on the story is not the guy who wrote this story. The Canadian reactors are disgusting disease factories. These are the legal emissions by the trillions that they're allowed to release of tritium-3H. And they don't even have the courage or the fortitude to put the word 3H there, do they? Which is totally different than natural tritium. Natural tritium and 3H tritium are totally... 3H is anthropogenic man-made, which is organically bound in your body. It's totally different than the natural stuff from the solar system, which was there was very little natural stuff pre-nuclear industry. It's an industry that's entire legacy is predicated upon deceit, lie, bald-faced lies, genocidal, omnicidal lies. Combined limits for tritium-3H, liquid and vapor, trillion atoms. So 16,400,000 trillion atoms legally released from Point Leper. Because it's not going into the Great Lakes, so therefore they can release whatever they want, they said. These are monsters, eh? When you look at what other countries are releasing that they can't contain, it's still brutal, but look what the Canadians are doing. Holy shit. And then to have the incredible hubris, the arrogance to suggest that they're safe. Now this province is testing new smaller reactors. The province is not testing smaller reactors. New Brunswick is not testing a smaller reactor. What are you talking about? Moltex and the rest of them don't have an application into the regulatory agency for the license. They still got to go through that whole process, the regulatory process, which is like 400 people have to go through their license application to prove the reactor has some merits. Then they have to, when they finally get it passed through all the inspections and everything else, and it gets sent back to them to re-engineer it, it goes. They have to go build one eventually at one of the national laboratories, Chalk River, in the case of Canada. And so when he's telling you they're testing, now the province is testing new smaller reactors, that's the absolute dishonest. It's simply not. They don't have a reactor. How can you test something you don't have? Right? And so by putting those connotations there, they lull people into that complacency that it already exists. Well, it already exists. Nothing we can do about it. No, it doesn't exist. And you should fight these. You should hold these people accountable. You should never, ever allow these people to get away without without putting them on blast for their insidious propaganda. I apologize for giving a shit about everybody on this planet and every species. Because I think sometimes I'm the weirdo because I care. Think of them as nuclear batteries. Like, what are you talking about, man? Compact, efficient, ideal for power in communities, or even repurposing old coal sites, which is what quasi-electric is going to do, right? For geothermal. And so about 2 years later, the nuclear industry came out and said, well, we can build small modular reactors and power abandoned coal sites. Stole quasi-electric's thunder. And they got 100 companies with all the money they could ever hope for, and they still can't build a small modular reactor. And the Canadian small modular reactor is 50 feet taller than the massive reactors at Fukushima. You're talking about 240-foot reactors. What's modular about that? What's small about that? They're massive. They are about jobs. Refurbishing Poised has already kept hundreds employed. Poised is shutting down all the time. It's breaking down all the time. There's massive releases going on there, and they refuse to tell the population, the public, what's happening for months and months at a time while it's shut down. They spend billions of dollars on refurbishment. If that's what you call employment, you disgusting maggot. You're just disgusting maggot. That's the disgusting... I got stronger words, I'm just not going to use it. Nova Scotia faces a tough challenge. 55% of electricity still comes from coal. Coal is awesome. Where everybody's acclimated to coal emissions through genetic superior selection. And if you didn't put the coal in the middle of the communities, you wouldn't have an issue, would you? Because coal emissions don't travel very far. And the carbon from it creates more trees, more insects, more puppies, more birds. Nuclear kills everything. And the clock is ticking to phase it out. Yeah, because this was their way of promoting the nuclear industry. This is why there are big pushes on for small modular reactors, because they engineered over the last 14 years, post-Fukushima, a scenario, because climate change is real, it's caused by 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry. And emissions never go away. They're pulsing energy at the speed of light every second for billions of years. While wind and solar will play a role, they cannot provide 24/7 power alone, especially during cold winter. Like, you low-life, disgusting parasite. Ultra-deep geothermal tech poised to disrupt the global energies as it taps the Earth's core to outshine fossil and nuclear. Nuclear has the same gigawatts today as it had in the 90s. Right? And then these little worms, these little parasites, write these stories, and they get somebody to put their name on it in the media, and then the media gets a big chunk of money to run the story. You can't even comment underneath them. All waste is securely stored. What are you talking about? The fuel pools, you can't secure a fuel pool. Everything, each fuel pool is evaporating, and there's 1,000 of them worldwide. Evaporates 120,000 liters out of 1,000 different fuel pools, 1,000 times a day. Each fuel pool, and there's over 1,000 of them, evaporate about 100, plus it could be double that certainly, depending on how old the fuel pool and how much fuel is in it, how many reactor cores are in it. The reactor cores are still splitting atoms. The reason nuclear waste is dangerous is because it's still splitting atoms into your environment. That's why they're almost always surrounded by farms. And then the Great Lakes, of course, Canadian Canada reactors are right on the Great Lakes. And where do people get their water from? The Great Lakes. How many? From millions and millions and millions of people depend upon the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes are the water used for just tens of thousands of farms. So they poison you that way. They still get you. This is an industry that hates your guts and hates the 8 million species, and done a pretty good job exterminating the future of humanity and the species, haven't they? To suggest it's securely stored, like, what are you talking about? You can't go near it. No one's going to steal it. Securely stored. Everything is hemorrhaging into an environment 24 hours a day. You can't contain it. And you're producing more fuel all the time. It goes in the pool. Now you're producing more releases every day. Now you have reached the point now where everybody's sick on the planet. And monitor and potentially reuse the technology advances. You can't reuse it. It's illegal in Canada and the United States to to reprocess used fuel, which is only 3% used, by the way. And the problem with it was it's so fragile, they have to take it out of the reactor because it's starting to swell up. And if it becomes more damaged, you won't be able to get it out of the reactor, so you take it out early. It's illegal to reprocess it in Canada and the United States. And so they still haven't changed the law to make it legal. So, like, putting these connotations there, you're talking about whoever wrote the story is extremely pro-nuclear scumbag that has destroyed hundreds of millions of people's lives over the years. France offers a lesson. By embracing nuclear energy, it now enjoys some of Europe's lowest electricity prices and cleanest air. Every reactor site is hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools, and it's insidious. Almost every reactor site is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Workers in the New Brunswick energy sector deserve stable jobs. Well, people don't deserve to be poisoned. What's more important, poisoning people or giving nuclear plant workers jobs to poison people? You lowlife to write something like that. Google announced a massive project that will drill for unlimited energy sources hidden beneath our feet. So here's Google on the same day also doing geothermal. Right, here's Google doing geothermal. I didn't put the rest of the story there, just put that one there. So Google's doing nuclear, which they're not. They're not building nuclear. They just agreed to fund some of the nuclear because the nuclear industry has so much influence. If you don't kick back to the nuclear industry, they're going to run into problems. And everyone deserves reliable power that does not break the bank. Nuclear is the most resource, the most expensive energy, period, bar nothing. Win-win for the region. And then the people in New Brunswick who are reading the story have no concept. They're probably buying it, right? Buying into the lies and propaganda and deceit. Or bake the planet, which is what nuclear does. So whoever wrote the story knows that nuclear is the issue. That's one of the most insidious statements I've ever seen in a story, by the way. Or bake the planet, which is what you see post-Fukushima. The planet is baking because of a pulse event we had, right? Look at the censorship tonight. 13 viewers, 13 likes, 19 votes. That's absurd censorship on me, boy. And I'm fighting for the people that are censoring me too, so that their children could have a future, because their parents are trying to take it away from them by promoting nuclear. Should India and Pakistan have sanctions for threatening to use nuclear weapons rather than Iran that has no nuclear weapons? I thought that was a great poll myself. 281 counts per minute, 299 counts per minute. 185 would be an evacuation zone at a nuclear site pre-Fukushima. Now my studio is a nuclear wasteland. Ultra-deep geothermal, this is quasi-electric, I think. Place to disrupt the global energy as it taps Earth's core to outshine the fossil. And the geothermal don't get any money. They have to wait decades to get their even test pilots up and running. The nuclear industry, they just throw endless, whatever they want. Whatever equipment they want, whatever money they freaking want, whatever land they want, they get it all, and they still can't produce anything. Geothermal, which is proven, it's obsolete technology. Everything is off-the-shelf technology. Has to wait 6 or 7 years for grants to show up to get money to try to go out and prove the technology. See, the nuclear industry destroys everything. It destroys everybody's future, and it doesn't share the grid with anybody else either. Microwaves, not drill bits. In a bid to overcome the limitations of traditional drilling methods, Texas-based Quatsi Energy is pioneering the use of electromagnetic wave for rock fracturing. You just basically evaporate the rocks. Their innovative approach utilizes a 3-inch metal waveguide to deliver up to a megawatt of micro energy directly to the rock face, vaporizing granite without physical contact. The method eliminates the need for the frequent bit replacement, reducing costly rig downtime, and improving the economics of the ultra-deep wells, So they can get down to 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, which is hotter than nuclear, hotter than coal, hotter than gas, hotter than oil. And you can do more with it. Anything you can do with gas, oil, coal, or nuclear, you can do a lot quicker, easier with geothermal. But geothermal plans for a 100 megawatt pilot plant by 2030 at Sandena's National Laboratory. So they have to wait forever to build something because they can't get any funding because the nuclear industry steals everything. Oh yeah, I ordered in the James Lucid donated $3.30 last night. Bless your heart, James. My goodness. And so I ordered in the front lower control arm, and I ordered in the bushings for the stabilizing bar, because my machine is after all the research expeditions, we have a bunch of trailers and we have lots of equipment, and we have just busted up the whole suspension, and we happen to be in a time where the prices are reasonable for the suspensions. So I'm just going to rebuild the whole suspension because there's no hopes of me getting a new machine, right? And so if I rebuild the whole suspension, that should tie us over for 4 or 5 years. Because you don't want to wreck the whole fleet, right? And so I have an opportunity to rebuild the suspension, and I have the tools to do it myself. I'm not happy about it, but I have the tools. I can do the work, right? At one time, I used to do all the maintenance on 10 commercial dive boats that stayed on the ocean, and I dove 6 hours a day myself, and I ran the fleet. I managed everybody, their checks, their grocery orders, helped them pay their bills while they're stuck on the ocean for 100 days with me. I was a producer, man, back in the day when I was healthy. And Google agrees to fund 3 nuclear plants. No, they didn't. They didn't agree to fund them. They agreed to just do some. Let me see if I didn't highlight the stuff that they planned to do. It was about funding just certain facets of the preamble to the sites, right? Helping with the licensing, helping with the site settings, the site acquisitions and stuff like that. They're not going to build reactors like the media was screeching all day today. And so I didn't order the extra parts because I got to go to the hospital on Friday in the city, right? It's a long way to go and back again, right? So I got to have something left over to try to help cover the extra expenses, you know. I'm a bit nervous because one of my ball joints is actually really bad, so I got to take the long way into the city. I can't get on the highway till I fix that. I'll have the parts next week. I'll have that fixed next week, don't you worry. But I still got to order in the tools. They're not very expensive, right? I'll get to it. Like Dyer nuclear warnings, Pakistan vows revenge over India strike. So India and Pakistan are shooting at each other. Missiles. I don't think they're going to go to nuclear war. But they should have sanctions for doing what they're doing, shouldn't they? Fighting has erupted between the two nuclear-armed nations, with Pakistani's Prime Minister declaring an act of war. Well, that's twice they declared an act of war. Act of war because of the water, and now an act of war because of missile launches. So this is definitely escalated. This is a big deal. India launches a missile attack on Pakistan. India is 6 times the size of Pakistan population-wise. Now, Pakistan's top political military leaders have vowed revenge after Indians' airstrike killed at least 30 people. So, nuclear weapons is not going to stop war, see? And because they got them, they're going to use them. Well, we're going to use them. Like, I couldn't believe the headlines, the stories last week, we covered some of them, where a railway minister was threatening to use nuclear weapons. The media. Who is in the evacuation zone if there was an emergency at Seabrook? Seabrook nuclear power plant has degrading concrete. Okay. Well, like if you have an accident, a nuclear meltdown, because that's what we're talking about. This is the radioactive fallout after 23 days from showing the French government study. This is a study of the fallout from Japan. This is not a model per se, right? This is 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air in radioactive fallout, covering the entire planet in 23 days. It doesn't matter Seabrook, Fukushima, it doesn't matter which nuclear plant we're talking about. That's how it works. And I can show you 10 different countries, 10 different governments' models, studies of radioactive fallout from Fukushima. It'll show you the same thing, all of them less than 30 days. So when you see stories about Seabrook, the evacuation zone is the entire planet. And to have a 10-mile radius, well, like this is not a 10-mile radius. This is the entire planet Earth in 30 days, or 23 days. Well, let me just find the actual... The industries, the nuclear industry, no matter how you look at this industry, if you're honest now, I'm talking about, once you look at the nuclear industry, you realize these people are scumbags. They're scumbags. They're just horrific monsters. That's the only way you can describe the pro-nuclear community, is degenerate monsters and scumbags. And idiots. Like incredibly educated idiots. That's what we're talking about. Sophisticated idiots. And, idiots because they destroy everybody's health so they can look good to their family. They can pretend to their family that they're special. Oh, my mommy works in the nuclear industry. They're really, really smart. They're not smart. They're scum. They really are, right? That should be right here. Like everything else should be right there, but... The problem is I got so much material. Let me show you these two. Do this again. This is the plutonium radioactive fallout after 20 days. This is Neptunium-239 to your left after 20 days. That's 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima numbers. It's coming up here. Now, the Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. It's covering the whole planet in 20 days. What do you think is going to happen? So, it's a continuous plume covering the entire planet. This is what the plumes, all the models, all the studies will show you the same thing. This is based on 30 days, 31 days when this stops. It's 31 days. Right now you're at 20 days of radioactive fallout of 1 million to 10 million atoms times pre-Fukushima background levels in atoms of radioactive fallout of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. All the models are showing us the same thing. All the studies show you the same thing. This is an industry that shouldn't exist. The coalition in Australia is split on nuclear after it failed to win votes. That's simply not true. That's disgusting media, eh? Nobody split on it. Everybody rejected it. They lost their party. The people in their party ran away from them. Their voters. Without nuclear, Wilson declared Australia would either be going back to coal or we as a nation are going to be deindustrialized. It's as fundamental as that. No, that's simply not true. It's not even close to being true. What a piece of shit, eh? You have geothermal. Anything is better than nuclear. Like, it's better to put a coal plant in every little town than it is to have nuclear anywhere on your planet. That's how bad nuclear actually is. Coalition wants Australia to adopt nuclear power. They just lost the elections. Peter Dutton last year said he was happy for the elections to be a referendum on nuclear energy. A referendum. So, like, a referendum in their version is a vote by people who don't know nothing about nuclear. That's what they've done every single time worldwide, right? Any referendums on nuclear is to people that are told it's like a banana, it's like a potato chip, it's like walking in the sunshine, it's like sleeping next to somebody. Completely dishonest, 100% dishonest, 100% disingenuous, 100%, 1,000% dishonest. Excuse me. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. It's not going to be a full show tonight. We're almost through it. I went early again, and that's just... That's the way it went last night, too, right? That's the way it's going to go tonight. And I helped last night doing the show early. Gave me a chance to go to bed earlier. Gave me a chance to recoup. Right, I'm on the recovery mode right now. I think I'm doing pretty good. I'll never recover, right? I got hurt a long time ago, and so I'm just trying to try to get another couple of years out of my poor old bones here. House Republicans, so we can just attack this nuclear industry and educate the population and fight for a future for humanity and the species that might survive what they already done to us. House Republicans voiced concern over Department of Energy nuclear and research cuts. Hanford, they're going to have to spend another $700 billion. And so if they cut $500 million here and $1 billion there, it doesn't really matter, because if they need the money, they'll just throw the money at them. They'll just spend the money. But you can't clean Hanford up. You can't claw back what you got done. You can clean up some, but you... So they're talking about cuts in the nuclear... The Department of Energy got cuts for like $500 million here and $1 billion there, maybe. And the nuclear industry can't stand anything like that. So they're just making noise. The waste cleanup programs. Like, the nuclear industry has so many Superfund sites. 90% of the money is stolen through the administration on top of that. It blows my mind, that statement, eh? The administration asked for a $1.1 billion cut for the office, which leads scientific research on energy. Well, it's just money they're going to steal, see? The administration also asked for a $408 million cut to the Office of Nuclear Energy. Well, unless they're going to do the job, you should fire every one of them. And clearly you should fire every one of them. Representative Mike Simpson, nice name, Idaho, voiced concern to decrease funding would slow the cleanup of toxic waste sites left behind by activities extending from the Manhattan Project in World War II through the end of the Cold War. They dumped 1.4 million massive 300,000 gallon tanks into the soil at Hanford. And they have 177 tanks there, hoodwinking the population, and they spent just tens of billions of dollars on, and they still haven't touched anything. Like, it's a despicable industry. Peace organizations, Hiroshima's anniversary approaches. Isn't that in August? This is only May, June, July, August. I think it's 3 months away. Like, why would you build Hiroshima and Nagasaki back on nuclear bomb craters? Because tens of thousands of academics have studied the entire population for the last, I guess it's 80 years now, is it? And then the findings from those studies is what's used to make rules and regulations for people everywhere else on the planet. And the people that are in charge of it are the most sadistic monsters you'll ever come across. And for 76 years, he refused to acknowledge that there was any internal radiation. So the victims who were manipulated and deceived into moving back into a nuclear wasteland because they built the city back on the nuclear bomb craters. Like the evil of this industry is really special. Like they really are the lowest forms of life we've ever seen. You know, as far as we send vast amounts of soot into the atmosphere. Remember that story? Forget about it. Nuclear fusion is a tech could prove AI and save the planet. Could power AI and save the planet. Like again, if it ever works. The perpetual joke about fusion, first off, there's 100 new companies. All of them with their alleged different designs. None of them are even conceivably going to succeed. It's about looting investors, keeping everybody on a fantasy trip of small modular reactors and fusion reactors so they don't come up with real solutions like geothermal. That's what that's about. It's about taking away the validity of the renewable industry. And then they just use batteries. They'll spend all the monies on batteries. The batteries will catch fire or not work at all. And they say, see, renewables is stupid. We got to get small modular reactors, which don't exist. And the energy grid itself for nuclear doesn't work for solar, wind, geothermal, or anything else. It doesn't share. And that's on purpose, right? Because the whole intention was always to build more nuclear and drive out any competition. And so if you want to blame the die-off of all species on the planet, you blame the nuclear industry. Sam Altman, whose sister is suing him for hideous crimes he committed against her as a child growing up, like a brother doing his sister for all that time. And he's going to lose too. Is confident that we'll unlock the power of the stars soon. Like, what do you mean you're confident? Like, you're talking about controlling 300 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures with magnets, and you know it's not going to work. And you built the biggest magnets ever on the planet. It can't work. The reason fusion works in space is because, like the sun can eject for millions of miles any oops and ahs, right? And it has to for fusion to work. You can't put it in a ball. But again, it's about saying that'll power everything, not renewables, right? It's about displacing renewables. Should India and Pakistan have sanctions for threatening to use nuclear weapons rather than Iran that has none? Well, yeah, that'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? $16 likes, that's all I get tonight, is it? Typical. And I couldn't save James Lucid's video last night. I had to refresh the page a few times before it let me save the video. Anyway, that's all I got for you tonight. And I'm a bit nervous about going to the city the weekend, doctors and hospitals and that. So I'm not sure if there's going to be a show tomorrow night. It probably is, but it might be early too, because I got to get up early and head into the city, right? But James hasn't got a new song up, so I'm going to play the Richmond Man again. She put it a few days ago. I really like that song. Only got 17 views on a amazing song. The censorship on James is unbelievable. James Lucid is unbelievable, eh? It's unbelievable, the censorship they got up on him. 17 views, folks. You should get over there and give them a thumbs up and a few views. I'm going to control the volume. That's James Lucid's site. And so let me adjust the volume on my end. He'll probably pop out a song now after this one's over, but we got a short show tonight. So you just want to make sure it's in 1080 for everybody. It's a fantastic song. He's got over 300 anti-nuclear songs that he's created, these songs and the videos. That's more than the entire planet combined of anti-nuclear songs. You're going to love this song. You have a great night. Hugs for everybody. And anybody that can donate or never donated before, the links are in the bottom of my description. And try to, PayPal is the best, and you can use bank cards or credit cards of PayPal. You don't need a bank account. We have to fund this operation, and I apologize, but I got no choice, like Greenpeace and everybody else. In order to make this operation work, we have to raise money, right? Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. I'll see everybody on the next show. Hugs for everybody.
You said the world needs power. I won't disagree. There's heat in the ground and the wind runs free. You call nuclear the future, but it won't power itself. Nuclear relies on coal more than coal needs itself. You said crypto was coming and demand would explode, that AI would load what the grid couldn't hold. But SMRs stay delayed, no ground ever breaks, and the public pays out while the promise remakes. You said it's the hour, but the plan's still the same. The technology is analog from the Cold War days. There's no place for the waste, and yuccas refused. Vented dry cast containers become the only refuge. You say you lead the charge with a federal hand. Would you vote Price Anderson or stand with the land? You call it advanced, but the cycle's well known, still chasing a fuel that should have stayed into stone. They brought in the waste with no warning or word. No records were filed and no voices were heard. The workers got sick, yet their claims were denied. But their jobs paid well, or so at the time. Say the same line again, just a little more vague. Let the cost wash away while the lobbyists wave. It's the same old plan with a new name again. And the public keeps paying again and again. The words that you sign will be printed and praised with a ribbon and stamp on a speech full of praise. This is abundance, they'll claim as they lead. But nuclear won't build what the future will need.